Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for all the support on my last video, and as promised, we're getting it to 100 likes. Here's a tutorial for my most popular edit on Instagram. If you don't already follow me, link is in the description. Feel free to check it out. Now let's get started. I'll go ahead and click through each of the layers so you can see an overview for how the image was created. So you'll see some cleanup on the skin, a lot of dodge and burn for the spider and the eye. Then you'll see some layer masks for how we got legs to pop out of the eyelid. And then some different elements like the web and the other spider at the top. And then how we ended it with a nice cohesive color grade to finalize the look. But let's have some fun and create this from scratch. So I created another folder where I have our 4 main photos we'll work with. The eye, the spider, the web, and then the second spider on top. So go ahead and press Command J on your keyboard, duplicate that layer, then we'll press J to get our spot healing brush, and we're going to go through and clean up some of those imperfections on her skin. I'm going to go ahead and speed this part up, but as you're going through you can use the left and right brackets on your keyboard to increase and decrease the size of your brush. Much better. Now let's go ahead and rename this layer just to keep things organized. And then we're going to go ahead and click Command J, duplicating it. And this one's going to be our frequency separation to add a little bit more smoothing on the skin. So Command I to invert it. And actually before that, let's go back and convert to Smart Object. Okay, so Command I, invert it, go to blending modes and go down to Vivid Light, Vivid Light. And then we'll go to the top, go to filters, and go down to other and high pass. The goal with this one is to blur it as much as you can without losing too much on the edges and having the different colors bleed over. So we can try a bit more, something like that. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, and then let's go to filter, blur, and then Gaussian blur. And these settings just depend on your image, but we'll play with it to get the texture right and recreating a little bit of that texture in the pores. Something around 9.1. Cool, so create a layer mask, then go ahead and Command I to invert it, and then B for our brush tool, using our brackets to increase the size, and then if you click and hold Control and Option and drag up, you'll decrease the hardness of the brush. And then just make sure your flow and opacity are at 100%, and then we can go ahead and start painting in the parts of the skin that we want to be smooth. And be sure to avoid any of the edges like the eyebrow or the eyelid, because that will just mess it up. So let's go ahead and click on and off to see how that looks. And we might go ahead and decrease the opacity. We don't want it to be too fake, but just a little bit to help it feel a bit more smooth. Maybe around 50. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay, time for the fun part. So we have our spider layer right here. And this will be more for a reference. We're going to go ahead and do some painting with some curves adjustment layers. So let's create 2 of those. Name the first one Dodge, second one Burn. And then we're going to click on the curves on the Dodge and bring it up a little bit to brighten the image. Go ahead and click there. Command I to invert the layer mask so we hide it. Same thing for Burn, but opposite direction, darkening the image. And that will allow us to be able to paint in our highlights and our shadows. Let's click on the spider again, and then we're going to go to our blending mode and go to overlay. So we won't actually use the spider in the image, we want to just reference it. So this will give us an idea of where the spider's highlights and shadows are. So with our brush tool, let's decrease the flow down to, let's try around 5%. I want to keep this pretty low so we just do it subtle. Take things nice and slow on this to make it look nice. We'll start painting in where some of those highlights will be. Some parts might be easier without the spider showing, so I'm going to hide it, Command click, and we'll get an outline of the selection of the spider, and we'll go ahead and start painting in. Let's try 20%, boost it up a bit more. There we go. Start painting in some of those highlights and doing our dodging. I'll speed this part up as well, but make sure you take your time. You don't want to rush this. That way it looks nice and clean and as realistic as possible. For the middle section of the spider, I'm going to bring the layer back and then use it as a reference to paint in some more of the textures of where the spider's bumps are and get a better feel for its body so it feels more realistic. And then same idea for the burn layer, go ahead and paint in those shadows and just pay attention to the light source in the actual image to make sure it feels like it's where the light would be hitting the spider and the shadows are in the right place, referencing the spider image as much as possible as we go ahead and paint this in. So that's looking nice. Let's go ahead and click these two layers, Command G to group them and name this dodge and burn. And then let's get this spider back to normal so we can change it back to normal blending mode. And then we're gonna work on the spider legs coming out of the eye. So on the eyelid, we'll be using the liquify tool. So a little trick I like to do is to get our brush tool and go ahead and paint a couple dots on the eyelid where the spider legs are coming out. Just since when you're using the liquify tool, you can't actually see the other layers above it. So this will give us our reference points. And then for liquify, it's Command Shift X. And then let's zoom into the eye so we can get nice and close. We're gonna go ahead and move that skin on the eyelid to bring it down a little bit. That way it feels like those legs are pushing the eyelid out and forcing their way out of the skin. Something right there looks nice, and you can see the idea of why we have the green dots since we don't know where the actual legs are, but now this gives us our reference points for where they should be. And then let's click on that layer again, click J. We're gonna go ahead and clean up those green dots. Now let's go back to our dodge layer. We'll add some more highlights on the edge of that eyelid. And same for burn. Painting in those shadows, so it's coming all the way out. Then adding the spider legs, Command J to duplicate. We'll go down to our blending modes and drop shadow. And I forgot to unhide that layer, so let's go back to drop shadow. And we're gonna make it feel like the legs are lifting off the eyeball just a little bit. And keep in mind, the closer the legs are to the actual eyeball, the harder the edges of the shadow will be, so they're not too far away, so the edges are still pretty defined. And then with blending mode already on multiply, we have our color where we want it. So okay, and if the color's not, you can just go ahead and select your eyedropper tool to sample the skin tones, and then you can just bring that down into the shadows. And that way it's not just a solid black and it feels like it blends a little better. So let's go ahead and rename this layer, keeping things organized. And then Command J to duplicate. Rename this one. And then hide. So what we're gonna do here is right click and rasterize this layer. This will allow us to do a layer mask and then mask out the parts of the spider we don't want without having the shadow move around on us. So get our brush tool back out, Control Option, drag down to bring the hardness to about 60. And then we're just gonna go ahead and mask out the parts of the spider we don't want, making sure flow is up to 100%. And let me go ahead and show you what it looks like if we didn't rasterize that layer, just so you can see why. So when you start to paint it out on the normal layer, whatever part of the leg is showing, it's going to have that drop shadow, and you can't have as much control over where it's showing, so we can't paint that part out where we don't want it. So on the rasterized layer, we have that more control. Nice, so for the next part, we're going to get our smudge tool, and we'll be painting in some of the hair that's coming off of the leg. That way it gives it a little bit more of that texture and helps it feel real. So playing with the strength, we'll have to see how it looks as we're going along, and we can tweak the layer mask if needed to make sure the smudge strokes are showing. And then let's add a curves adjustment layer, and in Command Option G to do a clipping mask, or you can use this toggle button right here. And then we're gonna go ahead and drop some of the highlights. We can lift the shadows back up so it's not too dark. And we'll just play with it until we have the right look that we want for the legs. And then we're gonna do another dodge and burn. This is a quick way to do it, is just to add a new layer. So B for our brush tool, D to set it back to black and white, and then X to toggle between the black and white. Then we can go ahead and tweak the flow and bring it back down so we're not doing it too much at once. We can paint things in pretty subtly. And then let's go ahead and rename this layer to dodge and burn. And let's click X to get our black brush back. And we can start painting it. Now we need a Command Option G, do a clipping mask, so it's only on the legs that we're painting, soften the brush, and we'll start painting in on those edges. Then click X to get our white brush, and we'll paint in some of those highlights. So this is kind of just a quick and dirty way to do dodge and burn, but for something like this, it works pretty nicely. So let's paint in some of those highlights, giving the leg some more depth. Change the blend mode to soft light, and then that'll make it a lot cleaner. So I can see on and off, just helps round it out, makes it feel more realistic. So let's take a look before and after. We can change up opacity down to, let's do 80. I think that'll look better. Then for the spiderweb, I found this image online, so you can always move it around, Command T, and transform it, see where it looks best. Let's put it back to where it was because I like how that looks. And then set the blend mode to screen. That way just the white part's showing. Then I had this other idea to add another spider at the top. So I found this other image of a spider, and we'll just need to remove that white background. So W for our quick selection tool, and if you can't find it, it is this one in the middle. So we'll go ahead and select all the white areas, including in between the legs, and try to get this part as best as you can. What I also like to do is, after I've gotten this, go to select and mask, and then smooth the edges out a bit. We can also shift the edge down, get rid of some of that white, and then add a little bit more contrast. Click OK. Nice, so let's go ahead and layer mask, see how that looks, and it did a nice job. So let's go ahead and take a quick look and clean up some of those parts that didn't get it quite perfect. Nice, let's go ahead and add a curves adjustment layer to this one as well, like we did with the other legs. That way we can darken them a bit more and get the right look we're going for. So we'll just play with it a little bit, bring this back up, bring the shadows back up a little bit more, the whites back up more. Yeah, that looks nice. All right, let's make the eye look more interesting. So we're gonna go ahead and add 3 different curves adjustment layers. And let's go ahead and select them all, Command G to group them, and name them eye. Let's open this back up, and what we'll do is we'll name this first one dodge, second one burn, and then this one will be our color. So for the first one, same as we did before with the spider effect, we'll go ahead and lift these curves to brighten the image. Command I to invert it. Bring the middle point down on the burn layer to darken that. Command I. And then on the color, this one you can just have some fun with. So I go to the different channels and go to red, and we'll take some of the red out of the highlights on this part. On green, we can just leave that one. Blue, let's lift the highlights on the blues a bit more, bring some more color in, drop the shadows a bit. This doesn't need to be too drastic because we'll change this in our color grade, but we want to make it pop just a little bit more. Give us more to work with later. Command I. Alright, and back to our brush tool. Let's go ahead and drop the flow down quite a bit. What we'll be doing here is painting in some of those highlights you can see already. We're just gonna accentuate them a bit more to make it more drastic and add some more depth and texture inside of that eye. So let's start painting on top of those natural highlights on the eye, just to help it pop more and be a little bit more dramatic. And with our burn layer, we'll just go ahead and paint along the edges of the highlights. This will help add some contrast. Yeah, I just love how much depth and texture this adds to the eye. So now we can go ahead and add some of that color back in. So I think I do this on all my edits because look at the before and after. It's so much better, so much more dramatic, and you can always change if you need to. Same on the burn, bring that down just a little bit more. Yeah, really making that contrast. That color all pop nicely. Dope. Let's take a look before, after. So almost there. Now we're gonna do a couple more adjustment layers. Dodge and burn. So we've done this before. Go ahead and group these and name them global dodge and burn. Cool, so let's go ahead and do our thing. Bring that midpoint up. Command I to invert. Same thing for burn, bring it down. And Command I to invert. And with this global dodge and burn, we'll be doing a larger brush and adding more of the contouring in the face. Okay, last part. Let's go ahead and make sure all the layers are visible, and then we'll click the top one, and this is my favorite shortcut here. It's fun to do. Command Option Shift E. We'll take all the visible layers and create them all into one merged layer. And convert this layer into a smart object, and Command Shift A, that will give us our Camera Raw tool. And this one's pretty simple. I don't think we need to change too much. Bring the highlights down a little bit, lift the shadows. Then I always just play around it a bit more and just see what looks right. Hopefully you can't hear it. We're in New York City right now. It's midnight and there's a guy screaming outside at the top of his lungs. Always fun. Okay, let's go to the curves. I always like to lift the blacks a bit. Bring those shadows down a little bit more. Keep that contrast. Then on the sharpening, we can bring that up quite a bit. And then on the radius, if you hold Option, you can slide this around and see where the edges are and how much of the edges are being brought up. So let's keep it pretty low. Same thing on masking, if you hold Option, you can see what's actually being sharpened and just focus on the parts you want sharpened. For luminance, let's add a little bit of this for some noise reduction. Helps it just feel a little bit more smooth overall and almost like a painting. HSL sliders, we can bring this into the teals. And just playing with the different hues, seeing what looks nice. And then I always like to add a little bit of grain, just add some overall texture and helps blend all the different layers a bit more. Not too much, but just enough. And then a little bit of a vignette. And we can even bring it up all the way just to see where our midpoints and need to be, where the roundness should be. The feather. And then we can bring that back down. Yeah, this is looking really good. And there we go, the finished product, looking nice. And oh, we forgot the drop shadow on the spider legs at the top. So let's go ahead and find that real quick and fix it. Click on this layer, Command J, you can duplicate that layer, then Command Shift right bracket will bring that all the way to the top. And then just real quick, we'll do Command M, so I'll bring up the curves. We can just bring this down and try to match what we had earlier. And then let's bring up the drop shadow and get that back. And same as the other legs, we'll go ahead and right click and rasterize this layer. And then we can go ahead and move it around, and we can paint out parts if we don't need them, but that actually works nicely. Just, yeah, that works. Nice, let's look at the final product. I always like to do a little before and after and see what we created. It's kind of fun. When I first made this edit, I think it sat on my phone for a couple weeks before I thought it was good enough to actually post on Instagram. Wasn't sure if I liked it or not. And then now it's currently my top performing photo, so hey, you never know. And speaking of Instagram, of course, go check out my account and give it a follow. And if this video was helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. I plan on doing more of these. Then leave a comment down below, let me know if this all made sense and what you'd like to see more of in the future. But yeah, until next time.